The gaming phone market seems to be shrinking. Just a few years back, we had 4 brands in Lenovo, Red Magic, Black Shark, and of course Asus. Now we only have 2. And they both seem to be taking very different approaches to gaming phones. On one hand, there's Red Magic, who seem intent on having a solid differentiation from mainstream flagships. Like with their design, with their choice to sacrifice optics for aesthetics, whether it's going with no camera bump or with the under-display selfie camera, or sacrificing the IP rating for an active cooling fan, you get what I'm saying. Now, on the other hand, we have Asus. Their approach is making the gaming phone more mainstream friendly. And that's reflected in things like having a solid camera bump, if that means providing better optics and with gimbal OIS, trading away a bit of peak performance if that means having an IP rating, and also adding things like wireless charging for convenience. Now, once you're done watching this video, I'd love for you to let me know which of these 2 approaches you actually prefer, the Red Magic approach or the Asus approach. Now, I've been using this ROG Phone 9 as my primary for a little under a month. In today's video, I want to walk you through what I've liked and disliked with Asus's approach. So if this is your first time here, or in case you just can't remember, my name's Ash, you're watching C4E Tech, and if you find this video useful, interesting, or anything like that, drop this video a like and also subscribe if you haven't yet. Now I'm gonna start with a build. The ROG Phone 9, it improves upon the change Asus brought about last year, as in it feels more like a regular flagship. At 227 grams, it weighs about what an iPhone Pro Max or a S24 Ultra does. And it's actually slightly narrower than those 2 phones, making it slightly easier to hold. Look at this back here. It's Gorilla Glass, but there is a pattern to the lower half that makes it not just smooth glass, helps with the grip when you're using this phone naked. Now yes, when you angle it, you can see some of the branding. There are multiple ROG logos, a dash of red on the camera array and at the bottom. But when you look at this back overall, doesn't it feel muted? I mean, with anime vision, you can make it look gamery if that's what you want. But if you don't want that, it looks just like a regular phone. Kinda stealthy, isn't it? Add to it, there's an IP68 rating and support for wireless charging, which you don't usually see on gaming phones. Of course, gaming specific functionality like the air triggers are present too, but once again, stealthy, like they don't have LEDs built into them or anything. And Asus have also added some mainstream use cases to these air triggers. You can set them to respond to a squeeze gesture and also have the right air trigger act as a camera shutter key. Neat, right? I like how they've taken something gamery and have tried to make it useful for the general audience. Now the headphone jack, that's something everybody appreciates. And add to it, there are 2 USB Type-C ports, with the one to the side being USB 3.1 and also supporting DisplayPort 1.4 for video out, so that's pretty cool. Now, one minor pet peeve of mine is this Type-C port being aligned to the left. It's just a pain to work with when you plug the phone into a Type-C controller. Even Asus's own Tessen, with some third-party controllers where the Type-C port is on the other side, that would mean the phone kinda hangs down from the controller. I really wish Asus had done another kunai for this phone. I love the kunai gamepad. Now the move from this form factor to this means the phone's a full 10mm shorter. That also means there's no room anymore for front-firing speakers, which is a trade-off Asus has made. But with the included case, they actually have an area to reflect the sound towards you. The ROG Phone 9 is still not as loud as the Phone 7, but this is a nice touch and I liked it. Now keep in mind, since the ROG Phone 7, Asus have dropped the thickness by about 1.4mm. And last year, that meant the battery capacity had to go down from 6000 mAh to 5500. This year, they've tried to get it back up to where it used to be. This phone has a 5800 mAh battery, and battery life, frankly, was great. I switched to the ROG Phone 9 from a S24 Ultra, and I can say the battery life is at least 10 to 15% better than on that phone. And when you need to charge, a 65-watt charger gets you to 45% in 15 minutes and a full charge in about 45. Pretty fast. Now moving on, the display here hasn't really changed from the last time around. It's still 6.78 inches. The refresh rate is higher though, 185 Hz this time, though LTPO is still between 1 to 120 Hz. It's also slightly brighter, making it one of the brightest panels around. Outputs almost 2000 nits under auto, and given this is a gaming phone, meaning cooling is of utmost priority, it rarely auto drops brightness. It's very good for outdoor use. Now on the con side, it's not all screen like the Red Magic or even the ROG Phone 7. There is a hole punch here, and while the screen has support for HDR10+, Dolby Vision is missing. Also missing is an ultrasonic fingerprint scanner. To be fair, the optical scanner here is accurate, it's fast, and its placement's also optimal. Anyways, overall the display, it's excellent for consuming media or playing games on it. It's a great experience. Talking about games, the performance. Now, if you're watching a video about the ROG phone, I'm sure that's what you're watching for, right? And here, things are a little mixed. Now, remember how I said Asus is now catering more to the mainstream? And with that approach, they've had to compromise a little. Now, don't get me wrong, the ROG Phone 9, it's still gonna give you the best 8 Elite performance on the market, barring just one phone. And let me explain. This is the 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme Stress Test. Basically a test which simulates your GPU being pushed for 20 minutes straight. And with most 8 Elites on the market, this test causes phones to drop their performance by 40 to 50% at the end of that 20 minutes. GPU gets maxed out, heat goes up, throttling kicks in, you get how it goes. Now, despite that 40 to 50% drop, most phones easily ended up passing the 45-degree mark, some even breaking 50 degrees. Asus, with their cooling, they have this under control. The ROG Phone 9 only gets to about 45 degrees, making it one of the cooler 8 Elite phones, and it also loses only about 10% of its performance peak. So you don't have random frame drops, you get a very stable gaming experience, comfortable to hold, and steady gaming. Good, right? Now here's where that mixed part comes in, because Asus, they've played it a little too safe this year. The tuning, it's very conservative. If you saw early claims about the 8 Elite, or pretty much every brand's claim about the 8 Elite, you'd see a 40% improvement in GPU performance is what they talk about. But if you compare the ROG Phone 8 and the ROG Phone 9, you only see about a 20% improvement. Now that is because Asus have played it safe, conservative tuning. In fact, the ROG Phone 9's highest loop score is lower than the Red Magic 10 Pro's lowest loop score. Red Magic, with their active cooling and liquid metal, they've went with the entire opposite approach here. They've not been conservative. In fact, they've been very aggressive. Their phone goes up to almost 50 degrees, meaning they've focused on raw performance regardless of what happens with thermals or comfort. Now, this would not be an issue at all if Asus could match those scores with the X mode or even the X Plus mode and that AeroActive X Pro cooler. Now, that would make sense, right? When the cooler brings temps down so much, they shouldn't have to hold the SoC back, right? Sadly, that doesn't seem to happen. So if gaming is priority, is the Red Magic a better buy? That's not a clear yes either. Because what Asus lack with the hardware level, what they've compromised on there, they've made up for it with insane amount of software features. I mean, a software video about this phone would probably be 30 minutes long. But let me just give you the highlights here. Take battery, for example, which is not even gaming related, just the battery. You have a steady charging option to cut down on the heat. You can limit the level your battery is charged to. You have scheduled charging to limit the amount of time your phone sits at 100% unused. And you can also bypass charging entirely while gaming. Okay, that's charging. Let's look at gaming. When you are in a game, you can have Game Genie come up. And while overlays like this are common on most phones these days, none of them are as feature-packed as what Asus offers. Like, see that real-time overlay option? Simple, right? Not really. You can go in and choose what exact information you want shown here, and that includes how long the battery is estimated to last when you're playing the game. Game recording, for example, that also has a ton of granular controls. Then there are some AI features available for some popular games. Doesn't really do much for me since I don't play mobile games, but if you do, it's there, it's an option. Then there are your air triggers. Just see the sheer number of choices you can program here. Apart from the air triggers, you can also program motion controls to trigger certain actions. And there's a whole lot of choices here as well. And it continues with key mapping, not just for an extra controller, but for a keyboard and mouse too. Now all this, you get to do on a per app basis right from Armoury Crate. Talking about which, Armoury Crate gives you one app to access all your games and game related tweaks from. You can have different profiles be triggered for different games. For example, I have Slay the Spire run on Ultra Durable. It's not an intensive game and does not need the extra horsepower. I can have such preset choices for each game I launch. Now go into advanced. Once again, see the sheer amount of control offered. Like I said, a detailed video on software here would be over half an hour long by itself. It's also pretty darn cool that all this functionality is neatly tucked away into the Armoury Crate app, and the settings menu and the overall phone itself is pretty clean, meaning the learning curve for somebody switching to an ROG is not going to be very steep. Hell, if you want, you can even turn off all the gamery aesthetics and go with an almost stock look for the UI. And it's not just how the home screen looks. Even with some UI elements, you get options to choose between Asus and Google's implementation. So yes, you can mix and match if you wanted to. So software here is a big pro for the ROG Phone 9. But at the same time, it is also a con. Wait, what? You talk all this up and then you turn around and call it a con? Why? And if that is your question, good question. But how can I not call it a con when Asus offers only 2 Android version updates with 5 years of security patches? But forget the security patches. 2 plus 5 for this asking price in 2025? Just not cutting it, is it? Not when we have mid-ranges coming in with 4 plus years of Android updates these days. Anyways, moving on, optics. This time Asus have used the 50 megapixel Sony Litia Lite 700 as the primary with a 6-axis gimbal stabilizer. Now, if you watched my other videos, you know in the past few months I've complained a lot about Chinese phones having that crazy EIS jitter for video, rendering it almost unusable. The ROG Phone 9 doesn't have it, meaning this gaming phone is actually better for video than many of the recent 8 Elites we've seen. Stills are definitely a rung below, but the ROG Phone 9 does manage to do a very good job, to the point where in most scenarios, I didn't mind using this gaming phone as my primary. Again, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's a better camera than say the X200 Pro or the S24 Ultra, it is not, but it's competent and never made me feel like, man, this sucks, I wish I had a better camera with me. Something I definitely would have felt a couple of generations back. Now, even under low light, the performance was pretty good. And all these shots, they were taken in -10 to -15 degree weather. No fogging, not once. The 13 megapixel ultra wide is OmniVision's OV13B. It isn't all that bad too. And the vanilla ROG Phone 9 doesn't have a telephoto setup. Instead, it's got a 5 megapixel macro, which I think is criminal. Just give me a dual camera phone that's a few grams lighter, or 100 milliamp hour higher battery capacity would also be fine. You know, that's how I see it. What do you think? A macro camera on a gaming phone? Yay, nay? Let me know in the comments. Now, the 32 megapixel selfie camera, that was fine too. To me, this is a major win over the Red Magic. I'm sure there are people in the comments going, who cares about selfies on a gaming phone? And because, I mean, I get why people say that, because when you think about selfies, you think about Instagram, you think about, you know, vanity, but that's not what it's about. Selfies today is very important because video calls are so common, right? We're all connected. And that is probably the one reason why a Nubia Z70 Ultra, as much as I love it, or a Red Magic 10 Pro, as much as I like it, I could never use it as my primary phone because I travel a lot. And if I get on video call with my family on that, they keep asking me to wipe the camera all the freaking time. It's very annoying. The selfie camera, especially for video, because with stills, they're able to do some software magic and clean up the stills. But with video, that's Red Magic's weakest link, which kind of stops me from using it as a primary. Asus though, with the ROG Phone 9, they've put together a solid gaming phone that can be used as a primary by a vast majority of consumers. Now, there definitely is room for improvement. I wish they'd open up the performance, given there is thermal headroom, and then there's also that aeroactive cooler that they're offering. So at least with the X Plus mode, I think they should be pushing the 8 Elite to its max. They should be getting the same performance as, say, the Red Magic 10 Pro. Now, that is room for improvement. There's also the total disappointment front. That is the 2+5 update policy. That's just not cutting it. Definitely not at this price. But barring these two, the ROG Phone 9, it seems to be a very well put together flagship gaming phone with an insane level of attention to detail shown by the manufacturer, and that's not something we very commonly see these days. And unlike gaming phones of the past, this one feels perfectly fine to use as an everyday primary phone, even if you aren't an avid gamer. And that's my take. Now, before you go, knowing all that you know now, let's go back to that question I posed at the start of this video. Which approach do you actually prefer? Red Magics or Asus? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Ash out.